like to pick pretty personal examples because I think that's how we really learn. We learn from hearing from other people's experiences, and so few of us are willing to really share the bad and the ugly, that I like to kind of share that. Welcome to the Monday Muse. On today's Muse, I want to talk about the fear of being honest with ourselves about who we are. Gary Zukav, in The Seat of the Soul, which is an absolutely phenomenal book, says most of us are accustomed to the idea that we are responsible for some of our actions, but not all of them. We consider ourselves responsible, for example, for the good deed that brings our neighbor and us together or for responding to it positively, but we do not consider ourselves responsible for the argument between us and our neighbor or for responding to it negatively. We consider ourselves responsible for having a safe trip if we take the time to check the condition of the car before starting, but if we speed around a car that, in our opinion, has been traveling too slowly and almost caused an accident by doing that, we consider the other driver to be responsible. Think about that for a minute. It's so true. Our ego wants to pat us on the back for what we did right. But if we feel super justified for speeding around that car or that we're right and the neighbor is wrong, so our position is okay, we don't feel responsible for that argument. And that's just a trick of the ego. The problem is that is the unconscious workings of the personality. And the problem with it is it causes us to self-sabotage when we can't be honest with who we are. It gets in our way. And one reason that we can't be honest with who we are is because what happens sometimes if we do recognize something about ourselves or a personality part or a behavior that isn't great is we go into this huge shame cycle and we feel absolutely horrible about it. Or the other side of that is that we just defend and say, no, I was justified. All of that was absolutely fine. And this is just the way that the ego works. It's just the way that the mind works. But if we can't be honest and take full responsibility for all of our behaviors, even the ones that our mind tells us are justified, but everybody's always got a part in every situation, then we are not going to be able to manifest what we want in our worlds, and we're not going to be able to get around this self-sabotage. So what if instead we were able to just accept this? I've had multiple sessions with people recently, newer people, looking at their positive intelligence saboteur assessment, which you can find on the show notes. And the saboteurs that come up, and people will very, very often say, well, I don't do that. I don't agree with that. I don't align with that. That's not what I do. And then we scratch the surface and it's like, well, isn't that what you just said that you do? Sometimes you feel that way, right? And particularly those of us that have been doing this work for a long time, we like to think that we are over certain parts of our personality. We've progressed past that. And there's ego attached with, the work that we've done. And it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to share those parts of ourselves. But if we don't, then we're in an unconscious process, and we're just going to keep bringing the same results to our minds and to our lives. So what if, we were just able to get curious and say, well, wait a minute, this came up on my assessment, or this is being pointed out to me, or maybe there is a part of me that hasn't fully worked through this yet. Because, listen, we're onions, none of our personality parts ever really go away. They just show up in different ways. So, I had an ongoing, I wouldn't say grudge, but bad feeling towards something that happened a very long time ago. And I felt that I was really the, quote, victim in the situation, that I was ousted, I was treated unfairly, and my behavior, my personality part said, there was really nothing wrong with what I did. I showed up very honestly, and the problem was that nobody can take honesty, and, it actually really took me by surprise what happened. And through a myriad of things and work and personal work that I'm doing, I was caused to look back at this and confronted with, well, were you angry when you played your part in this? No, I was not. I was showing up genuinely just as I always would. I was shocked that I was ousted, as a result of this. But the more I began to look at it and the more I began to reflect on it, I was confronted with, wow, you know what? I didn't know I was angry at the time, but I was angry. And so maybe I came to that situation with some unconscious hostility. And the result of whatever it was, even though I felt at the time, or my ego felt at the time, that it was absolutely fine, actually had something to do with the way that it unfolded. And whether it did or not, the point is that if I want to grow myself and if I want to bring more into my life, I have to be able to be really honest with myself. And it does not serve me, or anyone else for that matter, but it certainly doesn't serve me to deny this part of my personality, which was that, I tend to get angry about things, this, that, or the other, and maybe I don't even know it. And I show up in a way that is upsetting to other people. And whatever my ego says, that it's not your fault and da 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 da, and they were in the wrong, it's not really relevant. And what it caused me to do was to make a phone call and talk about this issue that has been, probably 15 years old or more, actually, maybe 15 years old or more, and say, "Hey, do you remember this? I remember you were really upset about this." And the person said, "Yeah, I was." And I said, I want to apologize. I see now how that was upsetting to you. I didn't see it then, but I can see it now. And I had no expectation of the person saying anything, and in fact, they didn't. They didn't say anything about like, "Well, I wish I hadn't done what I did," or whatever. None of that. It was just like, "Thank you, I appreciate that. It was very hard for me." Right? And so my ego, of course, would wanna say, "I can't believe that there was nothing in return from that. There was literally no acknowledgement of anything." But that didn't even really come up because that wasn't why I did it. I did it genuinely and intuitively and from my heart and authentically because I needed to clean up what I had unconsciously done in that situation and come to terms with the part of myself that behaves this way. I normally would have been like, "Oh my god, that was horrible. I can't believe I did that." Right? When I would come to awareness of it, but it wasn't that. It was just, "Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that was an ugly part of me. That I see it now. I see it now." And I could just go and clean it up and do something about it without beating myself up or going into all of the things around or defending myself one way or the other. When we can do that without shame, we are actually unwinding karma. We are working through karma in this lifetime when we behave and react differently in an old circumstance. We make a different choice. We have a different behavior in a circumstance that happens over and over again. Well, now this is something that we don't have to live out in another life. And we are releasing energy. There's a burst of energy that gets released into, the quantum, and we are able to then open up to different experiences in our lives. So today, I want you to think about being honest with yourself about all your personality parts, and there's nothing wrong with them. This is not about beating ourselves up. We must understand that we are all the same. We are all one. There is no good and bad. We all have these, quote, negative parts of our personalities, and there's no shame in them. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please subscribe.